अस्सलाम वालेकुम। उम्मीद है आप सब खैरियत से होंगे। आज की एक और वीडियो के साथ आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर हैं। आज की वीडियो बहुत ही ख़ास है क्योंकि हमारे साथ एक सॉइल साइंटिस्ट मौजूद हैं और बाकी डिटेल इनसे जानते हैं। ज़्यादा वक्त आपका नहीं लूँगा और हम इनसे चंद बुनियादी सवालात ज़मीन तैयार करने के बारे में पूछते हैं कि जब आप ज़मीन ख़रीदते हैं तो उस ज़मीन को तैयार करना या आपके पास मौजूद ज़मीन है तो फार्मिंग से पहले उसको किस तरीके से तैयार करना है। इनका नाम जॉन डेनियल गंजाल्वेस है। हम इन्हें शॉर्ट फॉर्म में जे कहते हैं, तो मैंने जे कह के बुलाऊँगा। बाकी सवालात के जवाब ये खुद आपको देंगे। Welcome to our channel, sir. Thank you so much for your time. So, I would ask, tell us something about your qualification and experience. How long you have been working in the farming, and what is your qualification?
Well, like Shazad said, my name is JJ. I've been farming for almost 40 years, 39 years. I've farmed walnuts, strawberries, blueberries, wine grapes over the years. Oh, and tomatoes. Soil scientist, like Shazad said, degree from Cal Poly, State University, San Luis Obispo in California. And currently a vineyard manager in the area farming wine grapes.
So, our next question will be, if somebody wants to do farming, let's say I want to do farming, I have land or I want to buy land. What is the basic thing I should see in that land before buying it or before planting it?
Okay, let's back up a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Economics.
Mhm.
So you want to farm. You need to. What do you want to farm? And if you say corn or persimmons or pomegranates, you have to have a home for that. You just can't farm and then try to find some place to sell it. You start with, do you have the economy, a market for that product? And then you start looking for land. So that'd be the very first thing. As far as the topography or the land form or the location, uh, not too cold, not too hot, not too wet, not too dry. Resources nearby, water, transportation, fuel, equipment, uh, location. There's a
Mhm.
saying here, location, location, location. They're the three most important things. So
So,
we'll get into more details on what sort of soils and topography to look at here in a minute, but
uh-huh.
that's
Just
the
the basic thing before planting, that land should be in that specific area where you can sell your product, where you can have resources
mhm,
that you can plant. So, and the land should be good environmentally for that specific crop. So
right.
you cannot plant pomegranates or plums where you have a suitable for grapes. So that kind of thing. Okay.
Right.
How many types of land are there generally? Like how many types?
Okay, this is a broad question.
Yeah, it's a very open question. But generally, like,
So yeah, so there's hilltops, foothills, valley, and delta or peat soils. So how many different types of land are there? Everywhere from organic to mineral and the mix in between. Um, some soil is this thick, some is multimeter thick. So that's a difficult question and how to categorize it. I would say, in general, there are mineral soils and organic soils. Organic meaning not farmed organic, meaning peat, organic material, no minerals.
no minerals. Got it. And so when we take testing before planting, we do soil testing.
Mm.
So what do you recommend for soil testing? I mean, how much deep they dig for soil testing? So, or how many places they take samples from?
Mhm.
What do you recommend? Because you are doing it for almost 40 years.
Yeah. So it's not only soil sampling, it's soil pits. You need to get yourself a backhoe or excavator or something and dig down 6 feet, 2 meters into the ground, and look at the, it's called soil solum, the makeup,
Structure.
and not only structure, texture, if there's any confining layers, just the morphology, the taxonomy of the soil. So you can tell a lot by looking at that profile, if water drains well, if there's a rocky layer, um, if there's a thing called clay films, or calcium deposits or salt deposits, things like that, down to 6 feet, because your roots, depending on what you're growing, they're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 feet. So you need to know what the soil is at that depth. And then you can collect soil samples from that profile at specific questionable areas. Um, so that's the best way to do it. As far as how many pits to do in a hectare or multi-hectare area, you you guys probably don't have soil surveys over there that the government has outlined different types of soil.
No, we are under development country, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say development country.
So okay, if you look at a piece of land and you have a hill over there and a low spot over there and some really rocky soils over here, do a pit in each one of them, uh, no matter how far out spread out they are, so you can get an idea of the diversity of soils.
And when we are taking samples, soil samples, what do you recommend or suggest? How often we can take samples for soil testing? Like every year, twice a year,
Uh, let's say it's
for checking how many nutrients you have, the level of
right.
nutrients we have.
So soils don't change rapidly over time unless you are augmenting them or amending them or changing them some way. So let's say you don't do anything uh, every 3 to 5 years. It's plenty. But if you're adding compost or you're ripping the soil or you're disturbing it or you know you're growing shallow rooted cover lettuce or carrots or something like that, and you're adding fertilizer just to that top foot, that it might change a little bit every year. So in that case, you'd want to sample every year if you're adding a lot of fertilizer in a concentrated area.
In Pakistan, most of the people they use urea,
Yeah.
and they're planting grain crops like wheat, rice,
Right.
barley, and sometimes cotton, sugarcane. So like they're not going too much deep, like
Right.
maybe 1 feet area.
Well,
And
cotton has a deep root system, so it'll
yeah,
get down to 4 feet if it can.
yeah, but the other things like
Hmm.
wheat and rice and
Right.
barley. So and
So
also
now with urea, uh, that is a cheap form of nitrogen. I understand why, but that really alters the soil pH of the soil. It turns it acidic.
acidic.
Yeah. So if you're doing back-to-back uh, field crops like that with a lot of urea, yeah, you're gonna want to sample every year,
Every year.
at least for the macronutrients, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, and get a pH and an organic value at a minimum.
And what if if they take a sample of the land, soil testing, and the pH of the land, pH of the soil is high? What should they do?
Okay, high pH means alkaline or saline, typically saline soils. That's where your urea would work,
Yeah.
right? It's got a high pH. It's got a lot of high carbonates in it, and so either the urea, or if they don't want to use that fertilizer, they can put on sulfur. Now, sulfur alone won't lower the pH, but the sulfur plus water plus bacteria it's called a thiobacillus bacteria, will ingest that sulfur compound, combine it with a hydrogen, and make sulfuric acid.
Mm-hmm.
And that over time, it's slower, but it works. It'll lower the pH.
And the same question on the opposite side, if they do have a low pH, like if the land becomes acidic, what
Acidic, yeah.
what should they do?
In that case, you need to add calcium carbonate, which is lime, something like that, to neutralize that acid. You want to avoid urea in that case, and you got to add more calcium just to buffer all those hydrogen ions.
And I saw here you guys are using gypsum.
Yeah,
So is it on the high level pH side or on the low level pH side? Or
gypsum is neutral.
neutral?
It's calcium sulfate.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't impact the soil pH, positive or negatively. It is. We add it to try to bump off some of the larger ions like potassium and sodium, even magnesium, with the calcium, and that opens up the pores so it can permeate more water. That's why you add gypsum, is to open up the soil so it drains.
What is the good range of pH?
For most crops, it's 6.4, 6.5 to 7.4, right in there. 7's neutral. That's for most crops. There are some exceptions. I don't know if they grow very many blueberries over there, but blueberries, rhododendrons, azaleas, they like 4 and 4.5, really acidic soil.
Most of the people they are watching video, they are grain farmers, so
So neutral.
neutral. 7.
7, 6, 6.5 to 7.4.
Uh-huh. And how much is water important? The health of water, what should be the pH of water?
Again, neutral. Uh, Maybe on the slightly acidic side, 6.5, if you want to be detailed. But again, clean water means low bicarbonates, low sodium. I know in Pakistan they have some problems with high salts,
Yeah.
right? So that's usually high sodium content. So in your water supply, you want to have minimal to maybe a trace of it, but not exceeding.
Yeah, we have land over there. It's world's second largest salt mine.
Yeah,
And in that area, I saw there is no cultivation at all because the sodium factor is very high.
yeah.
So, what should you recommend or suggest, like for those people, especially Pendadam Khan and that area?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It takes a lot of resources. High sodium or sodic soils. Textbook is put in tile drainage underneath and find yourself a clean water source and just flood it, get it to drain, get those salts to leach out, and the tile take it off site somewhere. Now that's usually the problem with sodic soils is no rainfall or access to poor water. So where all of a sudden you're gonna find clean water? I don't know, but that's how to clean it.
They do have a river passing by in few kilometers, but like that's a government level.
Yeah,
And on individual level, they cannot afford to do that. So we'll
yeah.
pass it. What is the most important factor or important procedure in land development or land preparation? What do
Most
you think? As
most
per you?
important factor
Yeah,
in land prep.
yeah.
I would say assessing the soil quality and diversity and adding amendments before you plant, not after. Do it before. It's going to cost a little bit of money up front, but add your organic matter or add your potassium in our case, or your gypsum. Uh, get yourself set up for success before you plant.
Before you plant.
And it's just it's very difficult to correct something afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what are the important nutrients one should have in his consider one should have in his land before planting? The important nutrients that should be in the soil.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about soil first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Soil is made up of 5 components: a mineral, living organisms, fungi, bacteria, mycorrhiza, um, air, moisture, and organic matter. So all soils have some of that, but they are, the balance of all 5 is different. So typically you like to have at least 1% organic matter. That is hard to do in arid environments like here in Pakistan, because the organic material gets used up really quickly. 25% air, so it has oxygen exchange, 25% moisture in most cases, and then a living microfauna or some biological health
Microorganisms.
needs to be in there, and then of course your minerals, which is your sand, silt, clay material.
So I would ask if they are using vermicompost
Yeah,
that can
that's
help to increase the fertility of the soil.
yeah, the microbial health as well as organic. Yeah. Now wait, what was the question though was
What are the important nutrients?
nutrients, right? So along with all those 5 factors, there's nutrients that a typical plant requires: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium. In field crops like grains, corns, I forget what else you said,
Rice,
rice.
barley.
Okay, nitrogen is going to be a key there. Now remember, nitrogen comes and goes, very volatile, denitrified, or nitrification or denitrification. So it doesn't stick around like potassium and phosphorus do. Um, so careful attention to how much nitrogen you're putting on versus how much water you're putting in, because you could easily leach that past your root zone or contaminate groundwater if it's in the area. And for nitrogen, I would suggest tissue sampling is more accurate than soil sampling,
Mm-hmm.
because the nitrogen cycle is so quick in the soil that it won't give you a good read. You want to know what's in the plant when it comes to nitrogen. So I would suggest
Uh-huh.
tissue samples.
Tissue samples. Okay.
Yeah.
And for farming, because when they are farming grains, they have to rip the land every time, every single time. Either it's 6 inches, 8 inches, or 1 feet.
Why are they ripping?
Because they before planting, like I would give an example of wheat. So when they are planting wheat, they have to rip 6 times. So then they plant. I don't know if it is right or wrong because I don't have much knowledge of that. But for wheat planting, they have to rip the land. So my question was
Every year?
every year. It's not ripping like we are doing, like 6 feet.
Yeah, I know.
They're ripping like disking in simple
Oh,
words.
disking.
Six to 8 inches, not more
Okay,
than that.
that's different than ripping.
Yeah,
Okay,
sometimes like 1 feet, not more than that.
okay.
So how deep a farmer should go when they are doing disking or this kind of stuff?
Well, they're trying to get rid of the stubble, probably,
Yeah,
right?
the correct word is plugging.
Plugging?
I don't know how to pronounce it American English, but you guys called it plow.
Plow.
Yeah,
Plowing.
yeah, plowing.
Okay. So every time you drag a disc through that soil, though, you're disturbing the natural aggregate of the soil. So in other words, it doesn't drain as well. The more you till it, actually, if you leave some sort of stubble, it'll actually drain faster. And but that's typically not sight pleasing. You know, you want to have a clean field, then you plant it, and everything's nice and clean. But it's actually better. I don't know if there's a thing called no-till over there or not, where they'll harvest the wheat and and instead of disking, they'll just drill the next crop with
Yeah, we do have that.
drillers right in the stubble, and they just do that year after year. It increases the organic matter, increases drainage,
So more disking
less
and
fuel.
more plowing is not good. If they
Not
do it
for
too
soil
much,
health, no.
not for soil health. तो भाईजान वो लोग जो ज़्यादा हल पे तवज्जो देते हैं या ज़्यादा हल पे जोर देते हैं उनके लिए कि आप अल्टरनेटिव मेथड इस्तेमाल करें, ये हल चलाना, ये डिस्क करना, ये ज़्यादा ज़मीन के लिए अच्छा नहीं होता, ये ज़मीन के स्ट्रक्चर को ख़राब कर देता है.
As well as like soil erosion. I'm sure it's windy over there.
Yeah.
Big dust storms. There, there goes that much of your dirt in the air, and you do get a little bit of organic matter put back into the soil by disking, but it's gone very quickly, and you're actually causing more damage.
How much is leveling important? The level of the land.
It depends what crop you're growing and how you're irrigating.
You would just consider wheat crops, grain crops, because
Well,
most of the people are
do
doing
they
that.
furrow irrigate, or do they flood irrigate, or do they
They
sprinklers?
flood irrigation.
Flood. Well, then it's super important.
Super important.
Yeah, it's got to be at the right drop, so as that water travels across the field, the front water only goes down so far, and then the tail water gets the equal amount of infiltration. If it's too sloped, that front end water just flies across it, and it only goes down that far, and at the end it goes down 3 feet.
This much.
So, very important.
And how much do you say is too much irrigating land? How much is too water? Because here I saw people are making ditches in the field. So when they irrigate the field, the extra water is coming out in the ditch, and the crop is using only the required amount of water. But in Pakistan, we don't have these modern techniques, or people don't know about them. So what do you say? What kind of the land, or what? I mean, basically, what do you say about our irrigation? What is our irrigation? How much would be more than, how much is enough, or how much is more than enough?
Yeah. So, back to how we use our water. We'll flood a field, and the water that doesn't go on the ground will get caught in a tailwater ditch, and that water will come back around, and we can use it again. That's the first thing. Second thing is how much water. Well, you just want to go as deep as the root zone and no more, unless you have a lot of salts in that first foot of soil. Then you want to get that salt past the root zone, and then that fresh water can replace it down to the root zone. So you want to over irrigate a little bit in that situation.
If it is a soil,
Salt.
salty soil.
If it's acidic ground, salty ground, and salty water, you want to overwater to get that root zone clean, and then replace it with fresh water. But if it's good water and everything is fine, yeah, there's no reason to push your nutrients. You probably have some urea in the water or something. You don't want to push that past the root zone either. So you're going to have to, run your water, take your shovel out there, and dig and see how far down the moisture goes, and then regulate your water that way. That's the best, most practical way.
And desi way to see it.
Yeah. Get your shovel out there and dig a hole, and just follow it.
What kind of fertilizer you think are good for land, generally? Chemical fertilizer.
Yeah, well,
organic,
I prefer organic,
organic.
but it's not usually practical financially on a large scale production. Organic matter compost that's clean and weed seed free, and doesn't have any harmful bacteria in it. all day long. Use it, but you got to put on a lot to make a difference. Like 5 ton. I'm not sure how much that translates, but 5 ton per acre minimum will even do anything.
That's organic.
Compost.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, and especially on large fields like that, that's a lot of material.
Yeah.
Um, if you have some sort of row crop or tree crop that you can band it
Hmm.
in a concentrated band down the trunk row of your
Yeah.
pistachios or whatever, that'll help. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in this case, we are
It,
only giving that line.
right. But at least you're doing something, you know, organic, because that's a longer term source of nutrients, and plus it helps the microbiology of the soil and the living part of the soil.
Hmm. Another question will be, the uh, what are not good fertilizers? Because people in Pakistan, they are just focused on urea, DAP, and like chemical side of fertilizers. They are just buying it from market and they are just throwing it in the land.
Yeah, it's
No
cheaper.
idea, they are cheaper,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, they make their soil the worse and their fertility goes away. So, what do you say about not
Yeah.
good fertilizers?
Back to urea. Remember, it acidifies the soil, so uh, you got to do something to adjust that afterwards with your compost or your lime or something to balance it over time. So bad fertilizers is any fertilizer that's overused. Is really the answer to that. And no, you don't want to waste your money, and you don't want to kill your ground because that's your livelihood. So some responsibility on managing it, measuring what's going on through analysis helps.
If a person have less water resources available, what techniques you should suggest they should follow? Because over there the main source is flood irrigation, so what techniques they can adopt to utilize the smaller sources of water or less sources of water to irrigate their land?
Well, when you say flood, in my mind that means water all the way across.
Yeah.
Okay. The next step would be furrow. You got something that'll pull a ditch and just run a furrow every so often, so many meters. So remember, you don't need to have to wet if you have. You don't have to wet the whole surface of the whole land. You can put a furrow in, and that water is going to sub out, and by capillary action, depending on where the next furrow is, it'll be a wet front all the way across, maybe 1 foot under the ground. Um, that'll save you some water. And then, of course, drip irrigation if that's a possibility. Um,
Like drip irrigation is way cheaper in Pakistan than here, and also sprinkle irrigation, that's another form of drip irrigation. Because in drip irrigation we add drips, and sprinkle we don't add drips, we don't put the sprinkles over there.
mm.
And
The problem with sprinklers is the uniformity of the sprinkler itself, just mechanically speaking, varies. Okay, wind direction will move your water wetting pattern
hmm.
all over the place, and then the transpiration, or not transpiration, but the evaporation of the water in a hot, arid
It is hot.
environment, you're losing a fair amount of your water to the atmosphere.
What is heat stress, and how is it affecting farming?
Heat stress is a plant that's water deficient and uh, can severely impact your crop level and the functionality of your leaves. You need the leaves to make the sugars or to, ripen the fruit or grain or whatever you're trying to grow. So it's something you really need to avoid. In some cases, you get a stretch of really hot weather and you can't get water on long enough or quick enough, you create a heat stress. The other thing is growing the right crop for the right area. You know, you're never going to avoid heat stress if you got the wrong crop in the wrong spot.
What are some best practices out there here in America that can be used for land preparation, soil preparation, for everyone that they should follow? The basic things, the generally.
Well, land prep, again, do your soil pits, look at your soil profile, take your samples, grab a sample from your water that you plan on using, uh, do analysis on that. You may or may not have to rip. More than likely, you'll have to disc. Might have to do some land planing. Um, really depends on your site. Might even be some rocks, gravelly soils up in the mountains that you need to clear some of that rock out of there too. Just to get your equipment by or something like that.
What do you say about organic farming?
Organic farming is good. There's a wide degree of what you call organic farming. The old school is very, say, hippie way, where it's you reuse all the green manure, put it back in the soil. You know, you add compost from cast away product, and there's essentially no organic or conventional chemicals used. That's the one extreme. The other one is the commercial organic, where they use a lot of organic chemicals, sometimes more than conventional, because their efficacy isn't as great usually. But they are certified organic, so that's fine. But if you buy an organic peach or banana or something, there might be more chemicals, organic chemicals used to produce that than in a conventional. Now, conventional, sky's the limit on what you put on. You know, the government regulates certain chemicals as health risks to either the worker or the consumer. So you really don't know what you're getting there on conventional.
My question was because in Pakistan the fertilizers are very expensive.
Mm.
So if these guys can do organic farming in a way that they can use organic fertilizers, like they can easily found a cow dung or vermicompost, they can make out of it easily,
Mm.
like these kinds of things. That's why I ask. On the economical perspective, I mean, like you said, it's a way a lot of things to talk about. It's on an open topic, but like specifically the people who are using fertilizers, and they can switch fertilizers to organic compost and this kinds of thing. So my question was, what do you think about that kind of organic farming?
Yeah, that's a good approach to take. Um, Again, it puts organic material back into the soil for the microbial population, and keeps all those synthetic things out of the ground. Yeah, so if they can switch like that, that's all good stuff.
What are the risks in farming?
Risk in farming. Uh,
Generally, I know it's all these questions are open-ended questions.
uh,
We can debate on them for hours, but generally,
People, your labor. You're going to have labor or equipment to continue to farm for decades.
uh,
Yes or no?
in Pakistan they don't have problem with labor.
Okay,
We have plenty of them.
okay. Risk is if you have a crop that goes out of demand or is surplus, then the price drops. Okay, so economic cycles, how much your crop is worth. Of course, weather, you're going to hit with a monsoon or something. Can't control that, that's a risk. Um, and Mostly economics is the biggest risk. Yeah.
And what do you advise my Pakistani youngster who are coming into farming, especially because I encourage them to do farming, and farming is future because everybody eats. I mean, IT, nobody buys iPhone every day, but everybody eats food every day. So, what advice you want to give them, especially by Pakistani people?
Yeah. So that relates back to why I got into soil science. I was sitting around in junior college going, well, what am I going to do with my life? What's going to be my career? And I started thinking, well, what is always going to be around and what is always going to be in the need, right? So cars, not really. You know, someday we may not have a car. Uh, like you say, IT, phone, no, you don't buy a phone every day. But soil, you need soil to either grow something in and live, or you need soil to build something on. So we need to understand uh, the chemistry, the makeup, the structure of the soil. So that's why I went into it for both industrial reasons and agricultural. So agriculture is more fun to me. I like growing things more than building things. So youngsters in Pakistan, uh, it's a thrill to grow crops, plants, trees, anything in the soil. There's, uh, I don't know the number, but there's millions of soil life in a teaspoon of soil uh, that you know requires nourishment, moisture, and in turn those biological species work in symbiotic relationship with the plant. Plant grows, gives you fruit and something to eat and even sell, make money. It just it's a thrilling industry, um, very rewarding. So get into farming. If you don't want to do the dirt work, you know, diesel mechanic, some sort of equipment. Invent a new piece of equipment that will help your growers. Something like that.
Okay. So this interview was really amazing. Personally I learned a lot of things, especially about soil and also about planting. And I really appreciate your time. And this means a lot for my people because there are departments out there, peoples out there, but technically, like I would say, uh, there are not good peoples out there. They can teach people what is right and what is wrong according to farming, in farming sense. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Shazad. Thank you.
आ, आप लोगों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में। तब तक के लिए अपने पैरों का ख्याल रखिएगा, हमारे इस चैनल का भी। मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए अल्लाह हाफिज़।